And you should be able to see a slide to get the meeting started. And you also, since it's a relatively small group, you'll have the ability to mute and unmute your line. So if you need to ask a question or whatever, you should be able to unmute. So can everybody see the slide I'm sharing?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So we'll just go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everybody to this evening's seminar from Giant Schnauzer University. And again, while we're doing this, if you can keep your connection muted, and then when it comes time to ask a question, you can raise your hand in Zoom, or again, it's a pretty small group, so you can just unmute and ask your question, but just be kind of respectful for the presenter and what they're talking about. So try to keep the questions related to the topic at hand, but do state your name so we'll know who's asking the question. And then the chat window is also open. If you'd rather ask a question through chat, you can do that as well. And just in general, limit your time so that one person monopolizes the conversation, if you don't mind. Just a little bit of background on Giant Schnauzer University. This is something we established a few years ago, and it's all in with the intent of increasing the number and the quality of the educational offerings that we have in the club. And its overall objective is to provide helpful and accurate information on a variety of topics. And we really want to be the most trusted resource for anybody that wants to learn about giant schnauzers. This isn't just for club members, it's open to anybody in the world. And that's what we want it to be. It's built around a university theme. We have individual departments, and each one of them are organized and offer specific courses related to their topics. And if you ever have questions or want to get involved or anything like that, you can send an email to giantsnauzeruniversity@gmail.com. Um, we do have it structured with several different departments, activities, breeder's ed, giant studies, grooming, health and heredity, and puppy junior college. And the particular course tonight, we've kind of put it in breeder's ed, although it's a bit of uh, an unusual one because it didn't really fit perfectly in any of them, but we think breeder's ed was the right place to put it. And more specifically, what it is it's BR 233, and it's titled Guided Not Glued, a Developmental Framework for Natural Ear Stability. And I think everybody knows this, but there's a lot of resources out there if you're dealing with cropped ears, how to post, how to tape, all the things you do with cropped ears. Uh, but natural ears take a lot of work as well, and I think some people don't appreciate that. It's not just leave them alone and they'll turn out fine. And traditionally, that was all dealt with by taping or gluing the ears to the head of the puppy. Now, this seminar that Bridget's going to share with us tonight really gets into the biology, the biomechanics, and everything that goes into how the ear carriage in a giant and other large working breeds, how that really works. So the growth of the skull, changes in the skull, changes in cartilage, there's a lot of things that factor into it. And there's kind of a critical period from 6 to 9 months, kind of when they're in adolescence. And anyway, that's why we see a lot of things we do. So she's going to go over this with us tonight. I think it's going to be a very interesting topic and should be good for all of us. A little bit of background for those of you that don't know Bridget. Bridget and her husband Bernie, they've had Giants since 1995, over 30 years. She trains and competes in obedience, agility, tracking, herding, conformation, and sitzen, which is now called IGP. She's earned many high-end trials, high combined, high triple awards in all those different events. So we have a very experienced and knowledgeable professor. The fine print that I have to read at every one of these, the Giant Schnauzer Club of America is pleased to offer these courses through our Giant Schnauzer University program. All courses are intended to provide accurate and helpful information to owners and fanciers of a breed. However, the club, its officers, and all of our faculty members are not responsible for decisions and actions taken by participants based on the information shared in any of the courses. So we're going to try to give you the best information we can, but what you do with it ultimately is up to you. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing now, and Bridget, you should be able to take over.
Okay, I unmuted myself and I'm getting the share screen.
All right, we can hear you. Everybody can hear Bridget okay?
She's pretty low.
Okay,
Okay, I'll speak up.
yeah, that'll be good.
Share. Okay, does everyone see my first slide? Anyone
It,
see my first slide?
yes, it's up.
Okay, great. We'll move on to my second slide. So I wanted to introduce everyone to bridging because I came across it with our new dog, and it's just supporting his ears lovely. But I wanted to understand bridging better and how it really functioned and how kind of what the extent we can use bridging to support unstable natural ears. And I just want to put out there though that natural ears doesn't. Sometimes they work out perfectly themselves, so it's only sometimes that they need support. Um, but anyways, and then I'm also going to talk about other support strategies because I figured I'd just round the whole thing out and cover everything with how it relates to this development framework that I put together to try to basically figure out what's happening with the bridging. So we have our genetics first. So we have ear set, leather thickness, size, skull shape that we're working with any puppy. And then we also have cartilage and muscles. And the reason why I have those separated out is because those are influenced by the environment. What's going on influences how they get expressed. So putting together this model, it ended up coming out as a load management model, the developmental framework. And bottom line is stability depends on hinge fold integrity and balanced rotational loading at the pivot region. Um, and in a way, we already knew this because the fold, and when I say the fold, that's that horizontal fold at the top of the ear. The ear comes up and bends over. So I'm going to use hinge and fold interchangeably here. That when that starts to get wonky, we have weird things go on. Additionally, we can have some rotation at the ear that pulls the ear away from the head. But those, anyways, I'm going to get more into that in another slide. So again, looking at the developmental framework, I'm looking at the development of the puppy through 12 months and what's going on here. And so the physics of it is we have the ear base functions as a dynamic rotational pivot region. And then we have forces on that pivot region. We have the high ear set and long ears increase the potential torque during displacement from vertical because the center of mass is further from the pivot, increases the effective moment arm during elevation or rotation. I try to simplify that. I couldn't simplify it without characterizing it incorrectly because of the way the physics is. So effective is that angle from the pivot base to the center of mass. And momentum arm, I kept thinking this is a lever at first when I was researching it, but it's not. It's a lateral distance from the pivot to that center of mass. So that's why it's worded wonky. But bottom line is you have higher ear sets that increases the force of the forward, the load dynamics on the pivot area, or you have larger mass, so longer ears will increase more of the pivot area. So you also have skull widening, and particularly during when the hormones kick in adolescence, the geometry of the attachment of the muscles to the skull can be altered. So that potentially increases the muscular torque at the pivot also. And this is why we see that 6 to 9 month is we have the greatest instability. The cranial muscle matures. So as a puppy, it's not as strong as, once they get to be a teenager, they get much stronger muscles. So that can have more rotational force on the ears. And so it ended up being actually pretty simple once I broke the physics down on figuring out how the bridge worked and how it supported the ear. But what I also came across was what's happening during these developmental periods. So we have cartilage adaptation principles. And so the cartilage structure adapts to forces it experiences over time. And so this was interesting that in the old ways, we would use tape that went from one ear under the chin to the other ear or glue the ears down, and that immobilized the ears. And so that actually is not the optimal for having the cartilage strengthen. And what is optimal is moderate stress is applied repeatedly and in a consistent orientation. So basically the ears in the correct or optimal carriage, because there's not I don't want to say it's the correct way because really we have all different ear shapes and sizes. We're just going for the optimal. And when we look at the breed standard, what we're really looking at, ear set, that's genetics, that's their leather thickness, those are all, and size. That's it. They're mentioned in the breed standard, but what is mentioned that we have some control over is that laying adjacent to the cheeks. So, because you'll see sometimes the ears pull off, and that's because of the rotational going on at the base from the muscles mainly, but and then how the cartilage responds to that. Which, kind of jumping ahead here. Okay, so the ideal cartilage, I went over that, is that moderate and consistent orientation, and the cartilage stabilized or repeated load stays within its bending resistance. Actually, in other words, when it exceeds the load, then it doesn't stabilize there. It actually stabilizes all around that area. And that's where we get our creases in the fold when they've shifted up. And first you have fold collapse, and then you have these creases form. And what's interesting is the cartilage will actually stabilize around these creases before the ear finishes maturing. So you can have creases form earlier than the ear's finished. Also, thicker leather is more resistant to bending and collapse under load. Cartilage plasticity decreases as maturation progresses. So that's looking at the cartilage development. Now we skip to the muscles, and it's actually the muscular development that we have influence on, because the muscle will develop whether it has load or not have load, but it's how the animal is able to use that muscle. So baseline muscle tone determines resting ear carriage, and then normal muscle use develops both momentum and stabilizing control at the ear base. And this is where, when we tape the ears or glued the ears, we were immobilizing the ears, and so the muscles weren't getting any signals about moving around and developing that neuromuscular coordination. And some of you might have been familiar with, we get the glue comes off, or the tape comes off, especially when they're older, past 6 months. Well, their maturation is slowing down, but they still have things going on, and we've released these forces. And so now we have the acceleration of that muscle forces underneath. And that can quite do a lot of rotation at the base and pull those ears off. Repeat directional forces reinforce rotational movement patterns. That gets to, again, if it's not the resting ear carriage, if they're constantly flicking their ears out, then that it emphasizes that, and then that will actually become the dominant carriage for the ears. Long-term symmetry depends on balanced base rotation and equal muscle engagement. And so this is why it's important, if we're going to support one ear, that we support the other ear, so that the muscles develop with the same forces around them. Because a little bit of them being off can get exaggerated as the puppy matures. So what can go wrong? Kind of alluded to it. So we have three basically instability problems. The biggest one I see is base rotational problem, where the ear drifts away from the cheek. So the rotational torque overwhelms the base stability. And if this continues, we usually have hinge fatigue associated with the base rotation problem, and getting a crease, usually on the farther outward lateral side of the ear in that hinge area. We can also have hinge elevation. I have not seen this in a really long time, but I have seen pictures of giants with it before. And then we have mid-span structural problems, and that's where the leather collapses, usually in the vertical groove. And that happens usually when it's a younger, so under 6 months. So we have different appearances, but the mechanics are all the same. They reflect a rotational loading exceeds structural capacity during growth. And so bridging stabilizes the hinge and distributes load across the ear while preserving normal movement, giving cartilage and muscle development time to mature under these balanced forces. And this is what makes bridging so amazing. But like I said before, not all ears need to be bridged. I've had a few giants that have had no problems at all with their ears, and others I wished I had more help. And so this is just a way to give puppies more help if they are showing instability. So the biggest thing everyone should be doing with ears that haven't been cropped is they should just be monitoring those ears through development. You want to make sure they're carried close to the cheek with no rotational drift, no pulling away from the cheek. We want to make sure there's a horizontal hinge or fold with no fold fatigue or hinge elevation. And pretty much look at that hinge. It should be a nice little curve, kind of like you could put a pencil in there and it curves over it. And so the collapse is when it's kind of touching each other. And if it continues like that, that's when the crease will form. Vertical groove is present without being compressed. So leather collapse is pretty easy to see. The ear folds on itself. And then also when you do have the rotation, the vertical groove kind of goes away. So it just another, and always look for symmetry in the ears. But you got to remember, puppies' ears are just so elastic. They're flopping all over the place all the time. So if they, you were looking for is that they reseat to that optimal position when the puppy has a normal head carriage. So not when they're throwing it around, not when they're looking on their belly, you know, stuff. So it's okay if their ears flop around as long as they reseat when they have a normal head position. And so that's not instability. But if you see them not seating, then that's when we want to step in and help with bridging. So to go over the different periods, like I said, 3 to 6 months, we just have a lot of growth going on, but we're not really changing much of the dynamics. So the biggest thing is thin leather collapse, the collapse of the leather there, and early hinge stress. So like I said, hinge stress is always associated with some rotation, but you might not be seeing it at first. But when we move into the 6 to 9 month category, that's when the hormones are kicking in. So not only we get continued development, so the cartilage continues to strengthen, but now we have the skull widening, which potentially could change the torque of the muscles because of the angles of the attachments changing. And of course, we have temporal muscle development. So they're now stronger, able to twist those ears in great positions. So that's a peak risk period for puppies is 6 to 9 months. Now, 9 to 12 months, you're out of the peak risk period, but we still have development going on. It's just slowing down. So if you haven't corrected drift patterns by now, it's going to get much harder to correct them. But the concept is that they're still maturing, so it's still good to do support if you are doing support. Don't just stop early and say, oh, they're probably okay, because there's small changes that are still happening. After 12 months, the ears are structurally set. Not that there's small changes, but as far as what you get, it probably won't change after 12 months. I would say the exemption to that is if you had a really big dog that still has his head growing, still widening. Yeah. So I wanted to show you how amazing the bridging is. I have a little video of Uragon or Yuri here. He's got the blue collar. My other dog's got the pink one. And you can see how his ears can just move all around. So he has natural movement of his ears, which will allow him to continue to socialize with other dogs appropriately. And so he's not hindered. There's a lot of body language they can use too. Ears is just one little part of it, but they continue to use it. Additionally, you don't have people going, what are you doing to that poor puppy? Most people don't even notice the hair bridges. I'm going to start the video now. So very functional ears still. They're not restricted or immobilized like we normally do with the taping or the gluing. So the bridging method was developed by Hanna Konrádová in 2022. This is the first dog at the top that had bridging done. And there she's at the bottom left. That's her ear set as an adult. The second dog bridge was our dog Yuri, and Hanna bridged him at 3 months old. And let's see, so we always want to do both ears, so we have that symmetry and the muscle development. If there is a fold that is not correct, you want to reseat that before selecting the hair to use for the hair bridge. And you want to select hair that's underneath the hinge, but not too far down, because the farther down, the less stability it provides, and higher up, it's more stability. So the ideal area is 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch below the fold. Excuse me. We want to avoid fold compression. You can see here that the you could still probably put a little pencil under there and have a nice little clean area. And you want to make sure there's a vertical groove, but you don't want to compress it. So when I ran it through the physics, I looked at little tweaks we could do based on those problems that are consistent weak areas when we see instability. So that I shouldn't say they're consistent. They're not, they can show up in some dogs. Again, there's a lot of dogs that will not need any support. So if rotational drift, which is probably the major problem I see with giant schnauzers, if they have instability. And if you have physics, if you have the head side like 1/2 an inch below the fold, and the lateral, the side away from the head, 1/2 inch behind the fold, it increases the pull towards the head. So it helps with the ear set. If you have hinge fatigue is involved and it's not reseating, then just have it a little tighter, and you can have a little bit of compression of the vertical groove up at top. And that's because we really need those ears to reseat. And also the hair bridge continues to grow, so it's continuously loosening the tension. And if you have cartilage collapse in a young dog, you'd want to use a much thicker bridge. So just grab some hair some other places and make that bridge thicker, but we still want it flexible. And both Hannah and myself now, on her recommendation, have been using the Copydex glue. You can get it on Amazon, and it sets up quickly, and it's very flexible. Additionally, you want to clipper the ears, making sure you don't get the hair bridge area, because remember, the mass played a role in the torque that was on the ear pivot area, and so we want to keep that mass as low as possible. Additionally, it allows us to easily assess the ears. Okay, and for maintenance, you just need to reglue it when when the bridge has been broken. And Hannah said it did happen sometimes during wild play or scratching ears, but it didn't happen often. I've had to shorten a bridge when more tension was needed to have the ears reset after movement. And let's see, when to stop bridging. So again, hair growth gradually reduces the tension, so therefore the positional cues phase over time. But you want to wait minimum of 9 months, and more ideally 12 months, so you're past the predicted instability windows. But when you start thinking about removing the bridge, you want to look for no change during excitement or stress, when the ears are flopping around, and of course symmetry for several weeks. I can let you know with Yuri's 8 months old now, and when he flops his ears around, they'll pop out of position, but as soon as he brings them back, they go back into position. So I'm going to be waiting for past the 9, probably closer to 12 months, but I'll be waiting for that not to pop out of positions anymore. Oh, and that's another interesting thing, because cartilage sets up based on a moderate load. You have, and you probably all noticed this before, the ear, that the kind of the flat leather part stiffens up before the hinge part, because the hinge has a little bit more load going on, so it's not as ideal as ear that's moderately loaded. And so that sets up last on the dog's head as they fold. Okay, so first bridging, let's see, 4 to 12 months, and Uragon's 8 started at 3 months, and he's still ongoing. And this is a video of me fixing his bridge. The one on the left is broken, so it's the right on the video. This was the first broken bridge I fixed. Actually, I don't think I've had maybe one other broken bridge, but I ended up I overlapped the 2 ends, which caused the vertical groove to have a crease in it. I thought it might settle out. I actually had a head cold coming on. But anyways, the next day I cut it open and I added hair to the bridge and made it quite wider. Of course, then it was popping out of position when he was playing and not necessarily coming right back. So the next day I cut it again and I put it a little closer, and I was happy with that finally. So you'll notice the ear on the left, which is his right ear, is actually in the perfect position, and the other one's too tight.
Copy decks. Oops. Come on, glue. Okay. Oh. A little bit on both ends. Gloves so my fingers don't get so gluey. So I'm going to hold it together while it dries. Hold still. Starting to set up already. And that is it. So you can see the ear, the bridge is actually, there's quite a gap underneath because you want that little bit of a vertical groove, and it actually loosens up as the hair grows, so it provides a little less support as it goes along. But that's kind of the benefit of it also, is that it's not such a tight support, just helps the ears fall in the position that we want to encourage. There it is.
And so, like I said, I looked at the developmental framework because I wanted to see where bridging would be beneficial and not beneficial to help guide other people when to use it, and for me to use it in the future. I'm probably going to have a few more dogs. So it ended up bridging supported every ear instability that can occur, but it needs to be done early. So when bridging is not likely to help is when it's done later. So obviously fully consolidated mature cartilage isn't going to help. When you have those stabilized cartilage creases, it's not likely to help there either. Of course, any significant structural damage from trauma or hematomas, and of course any congenital pivot geometry abnormalities, but those would be identified, 8 to 12 weeks with the puppy. So now, cases works wonderfully, it's working wonderfully. Now I've kind of gone into looking at the model, and what if someone did catch something late? What can we do something else to help with the stability of the ear, but still stay consistent with the developmental framework? And so I came up with a new way of taping if bridging was done late and still, you're still trying to help the dog get optimal ear position. And this particularly is when you have hinge fatigue and you have that crease. You're going to have a hard time reseating. So if you have any chance, you could try this new method of taping. And how it differs from the old taping is that it actually has we want basically more movement of the ears. And so we need an independent anchor of each ear so that they can have more movement of the ears. And it has to be a narrow athletic tape. So the normal athletic tape's too wide because it covers part of the vertical groove. Additionally, you'd want to avoid the hinge area, and always both ears for symmetry. Again, nobody's tested this, and actually I hope nobody has to, because if you catch it early, the bridging does help stabilize the load, which is what we need to optimize the ear set. So if you do try this hypothetical taping way, I came up with kind of a 3-phase way to fade it off. So you have the acute instability that we're addressing, and when you're taking the taping off, if that acute instability has resolved, just with your retaping, then you want to move as quickly as you can into more assisted stability, because we want to restore that load to the cartilage and re-engage those muscles for neuromuscular development and for ear assessment of what's going on. So at this stage, you'd want to keep it on 3 to 5 days and cycle it off 12 to 24 hours. Of course, once it's looking good up to 24 hours, then you want to start fading the time you're supporting the ears. You're moving into phase 3, so shorter taping intervals and longer off windows. So by the 2 to 4 weeks, if it's still stable with that big gap, then you probably can just go to bridging. And remember, bridging is in place this whole time. Another hypothetical support strategy, this one I don't recommend, but I was looking at, if this is a load management model, we have stability depends on hinge fold integrity plus a balanced rotational loading at the pivot region. And if bridging takes care of the balanced rotational load at the pivot region, then what about taping the fold area to offer more support? Well, when I looked at that, it did not provide, it provided little additional mechanical benefits, but it carried the risk of compression with the fold, the way the tape interacted with the ears interfered with natural hinge function, and of course increased maintenance due to moisture and play. I would not recommend this, but I just wanted to put that out there as something someone might think about. This is one we've all thought about before, it seems like. The taping the vertical groove, just don't do this, period. This doesn't work. It's poor mechanical stability, since the tape goes around the ear. It's sticking to the back of the ear, which is the oiliest part of the ear, and the puppies knock it off really quick too. You can see it over compresses the vertical fold there, and it does nothing to support the pivot area. So the old way of taping, gluing or the old way of taping, those were both immobilize the ears, and I'm not saying that they didn't work, they just didn't consistently work, and that's what I didn't like about them. So and they're not consistent with the developmental framework, because it restricts the load on the cartilage, slowing its development. It restricts muscle use, so limiting muscle force production and stabilizing responses. It reduces opportunity for short cycle loading and reassessment. So this binary off-on that we usually had with gluing or taping, it increases our rebound risk, because once they come off, then the load is applied to the ear again. So now we're stimulating cartilage and muscle development again. And usually it's in that later period, we're not noticing the things so much, and you get these you get that drift of the ears coming off the head. Okay, so that's the development framework, along with 2 bridging applications and looking at other support strategies. And my conclusion is that bridging emerges as the most developmentally aligned stabilization method. And I hope you think about it next time you have some instability in your ears, but make sure, don't just bridge a puppy, because sometimes they have great ears all by themselves, but sometimes they need a little support, and I believe this is the way to go. And so with that, even though I presented this through a developmental framework, none of this work would have been possible without Hanna's original insight and development of the bridge method. I'm deeply grateful for her for introducing me to this approach and trusting me to share it with you all, and additionally trusting her and bringing up Yuri till he was old enough to enter the United States. And thank you to the Giant Schnauzer Club America and Chris Reed providing this platform and opportunity to present this work. And thank you all for your time, attention, and commitment to thoughtful development in our breed. So with that, do we have any questions?
Okay. And again, folks, y'all can unmute your line if you want to ask a question, or if you want to type something in the chat. So I'll read the questions to you, Bridget, that pop up in the chat. This is from Chad. He's asking, how exactly are natural ears judged in conformation if they are all different?
So the breed standard has a criteria that they should be judged against, and there should be medium thickness, medium length, a high ear set, and lay close to the cheek. So that's what they should be judged against. But like I said, all the ears are different. They're going to be different. You know, some are longer, some are shorter, wider. They're like human ears. They all kind of look the same, but if you start looking at them, they're all slightly different.
Okay, and next question, this is from Jennifer's. What if you don't, I guess if you don't have hair to make a hair bridge?
Then I'm sure there's another spot on your dog you could grab some hair from, but yeah, I always have plenty of hair around in my grooming area. So, but it did come up with a friend that had boxers, what she would do, and I think you could still do it with a piece of ribbon or maybe a piece of leather. You wouldn't want something that would you want s- you want something flexible, but not very stretchy. So, but I haven't gone down that path much.
Okay. Other questions, either, okay, here's one, just from iPhone. Do you feel supplemental calcium helps?
No.
Okay.
I think if the puppy is getting a balanced diet, that there's not a need to add those things, and besides, they can mess up the growth rate of the dog. So no, I would not encourage that other beyond a balanced diet.
Okay. Then Chad added another comment that I feel my girl's ears are big, but she is big in general. So,
Yep, different dogs have different size ears, so there's not a right or wrong, but we have this optimal hang style
yeah,
for our breed standard, and
yeah,
so they're all beautiful. But if we can help them out in when they're growing as puppies, because I know I've spent a lot of times with my dogs, especially if there's asymmetry in the ears, that just draws everyone's attention to them. So at least want to get them symmetrical, and just a little bit of help sometimes, they're fine. So.
yeah. Bridget, if you'll stop sharing, I'll share a picture from our illustrated standard, and that way everybody can see what the ear sets are supposed to look like.
Okay.
So once you stop sharing, let me share. Get this over here. Can you all? No, hang on. All right, let me know if y'all can see
Yes, we can
some
see it.
pictures. So the right page here, this shows correct ears with cropped and natural, and the wording is just verbatim what's in the breed
I would
standard.
I would add, I think that's a terrible picture for a natural ear.
That one, yeah. Well, let's look.
Yeah.
So look at some of the ones. These are some of the examples of what they shouldn't be.
Yeah, no, no. Go back to the one that is the example. I just want to point out that actually it's a nice length. It's probably got, again, that moderate thickness to it. But what you can't see well is that the fold, the hinge area we've been
Yeah,
talking about. I don't know why that didn't get in the
we
picture.
we need
I
a
didn't.
we
Yeah.
need a head-on version of the natural ears, I think.
Yeah, it just didn't capture that fold
Yeah,
that should be there, but the rest of it I agree with.
yeah. And then here's some photos of
And
what
you
they
can see,
shouldn't look like.
yeah, so that first one has uplift. The
Yeah,
second one is rotated away from the skull and has a crease at the end where he's got his little hand pointer. So those are things we're avoiding. Ear set too low, that's nothing you can do about that as far as assisting the dog. But those first two, you can assist by creating a balanced load with the ear bridge and avoid both of those situations. And of course, ears too long, we can't do anything about that. Uh, I kind of have a theory that people have been selecting for these elegant crops, um, and it has influenced the ears to be a little larger than maybe they should be.
yeah. Or just nobody's people that are always cropping aren't really paying attention because they never really see them uncropped.
Exactly. So
After 8 weeks old, they don't know what the ears would have turned out like. So
I really think after, particularly over in Europe where they're breeding for, um, with natural ears, that after a while, I think we'll have less and less instability problems as time goes on with the stock over there.
okay. A couple more comments in the chat. This is Jennifer. She says, think close a good video to start to finish would be helpful. I'm liking this, but having a hard time completely understanding where the hair is attached on the ear. And I think that's one thing, Bridget, I may get you to send me the videos that were embedded in your presentation because they were kind of grainy, bouncy coming through the Zoom meeting. So,
Oh,
but
sorry about that.
that's kind of normal for embedded videos inside Zoom presentations. So, but
Yeah.
we'll get links to those and we'll send them out along with a recording of the presentation. And then Lennar over in Australia. Uh, have a very baby puppy, young, dog oriented in the show rings. Let's see. So with them in the rings through that development age, do you recommend leather ribbon method given the regular ring presentation requirements?
The so I'm not seeing her leather. Sorry. So that was only the reference to the leather or the ribbon was talking to a friend that has a boxer. This hair bridge method works great, and I really wouldn't modify it because it's just wonderful. The glue is a kind of a rubbery glue, so it sets up really well, but very flexible, and it's easy to modify. Like me not being happy with having too much tension on the vertical groove, I I fixed it. I made it longer, and then I made it shorter. They're very easy to manipulate, and it blends in with the dog's ears. Uh, it kind of gets a little brownish color, but it's whereas some other material would stand out more.
Yeah. And I do think if you were at least here in US, if you were just take them into the show ring, you wouldn't
Oh,
keep
you
this
can't have
in. You
Mm-mm.
can't have it in there. It's just like if your dog's ears are posted, cropped ears, they got to come down to go into the ring. And, so that's
Uh,
probably,
Hey, Chris and Bridget, it's Linnea here.
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm just at a dog show because it's midday here on Friday.
Well, that's
Um,
a good place to be.
Maybe depends if you're winning. Um, my question meant that here in Australia, like I notice overseas, they tend to keep dogs out of the ring until they're a bit more mature. But over here, we're very much like, baby puppies in the ring, 3 months to 6 months, and then 6 months to 9 months, and then 9 months to 12 months. And so a lot of our titling is actually achieved 12 months or under while the dogs are still developing.
Yeah.
And given that they are in the ring during that developmental stage, and while you are taping or gluing or whatever your practice was in between presentation, you tend to have very minimal hair on the ears because you're either been clippering it or running flat work. So that's why I was saying if you were to use the bridging method, given that you don't have the abundance of hair available to use, the method you mentioned for the boxer might end up being the method available to us over here.
Okay.
Like because we what I personally did is I would tape and I would do various methods depending on what I'm trying to remedy. And that usually involved a tape and an alcohol solvent, and then let the hair grow out as long as I could, and then clip the hair out or pull the hair out after the fact to get the residue off. But I run a pepper and salt dog, so it's very obvious if I had anything attached to him because the color on his ears will change. So yeah, I was just wondering if you were to keep a dog with short hair on the ears, that method of using supplemental material, would that be sufficient, do you think?
Um, I think it would so the bridge has just a great. It's very secure. It's very durable. Um, Whereas I think if you were to do something else, it would be a little messier. You would need to then the glue would be more closer to the skin. It's not impossible, but yeah, it's really not consistent with conformation showing. And they are trying to push the younger puppies in the ring in here too,
Yeah.
but there's also nothing wrong with having a dog sit it out, but it's your preference. Um, yeah, so you definitely could try it. It's getting further away from the two examples that I'm comfortable with.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Bern.
I didn't know how to raise my hand. I kept trying to play
That's
with these
okay.
buttons and I couldn't
But
find it.
you're amongst friends. We're good. What you got?
Okay, so we have 8 giants, and 5, maybe 6 have, I want to say perfect ears. We've never had to touch them ever. But we have 2, and I think that their ears are smaller than the other dogs, and maybe they're a little higher set. I'm going to say they're actually, in comparison to the dog's head, they're much smaller, so they tend to fly away. And what one of them, well, actually, I've shown both, but with one of them, what I do is I do a combination of tape and glue. And I basically, if I'm going to show that dog and, the hair is, I leave a little bit of hair, kind of answering a little bit of the question that you had, Lenore. But what I do is I just leave the tape on or the glue on the ears until actually right before I go into the ring, and I have my solvent and I take it and I take that, get all the residue off. And actually after, let me move back to when I've had the ears taped and or glued, I'm just going to leave that on there for as long as it will stay. If it's a couple of weeks, they live in that. And so right before we go in the ring, I rub all of that, all of the salt, I mean, all of the glue, all of the residue off as much as I can get off, usually all of it. And the ear will hold the correct shape. It's almost like, I don't want to say 24 hours, but I'm also doing massaging of the ear, whatever. But that's just kind of, I'm saying that, but I'm still going back to, I guess I have a kind of a two-parter question, which is also genetics. Because is this happening with these dogs? Because like you said, we don't necessarily breed for that here in the US. Um, and I was actually thinking of breeding 2 dogs that both have funny ears, and I'm thinking, well, maybe I don't need to do that. I mean, if those ears, if I'm cropping them, it's not an issue. So I know I'm talking about a lot of different things here, but I guess what I'm trying to say is the smaller ear seems to have an issue if it doesn't have the weight or the shape to kind of keep it in place along with the bridging and everything else that we can do. I've had problems with that, and it's kind of like if I'm going to show the dog, I'll keep working with the ears, and if I'm not showing, it's just kind of a losing battle. And these are older dogs also, but through the years, I've had some that even with helping the ears when they were younger, those ears, there's some of those ears are just going to do what they're going to do. It's almost like a few dogs that are cropped. Sometimes those ears aren't going to stand. So I haven't the bridging that you've done. I would be happy to see the video, the clear video also, because it looks like a great method to try. But I'm seeing, like I said, to me, what I'm seeing when we have a smaller ear that's maybe a little higher set that just does that, that nun deer or the flying nun or whatever. And so I don't know, is this making sense what I'm saying? You
Well,
know?
actually, the modeling shows that the small ear has a lot of instability also. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not, I should have said small and long. I just tend to see more of the larger, longer ears. But
Yeah.
yes, the medium ear with the medium leather shows the least instability in the modeling.
Yes.
We do have a high ear set on our breed standard, and that one was associated with this more rotation as the 6 to 9 month category.
Okay.
So a slightly lower ear set will create a more balanced ear for the carriage. So that's
Okay.
what the modeling showed. So what you're seeing is consistent with the modeling.
Yes. So my question is, does this method, have you had dogs or heard of dogs that even with that it didn't work, if that makes sense?
So there's only been 2 dogs that have had this method done. One
Okay.
is still ongoing, and the other one turned out perfect. And you can see from the ear set in the video, hopefully, that is his ears are perfect.
Yeah,
I
they look
just
good.
want to,
Yeah.
I just want to make sure they stay that way because he throws his head all around, and they fall, they flip, they rotate out, they flip out of position, and I'm like, flip back, and
Yeah.
so I'm just kind of that's what I do.
Yeah. I found that massage works a really, really great deal. Is consistently as possible, along with, different methods will help.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm done. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Brenda.
You're welcome.
All right, does anybody else have any questions? Okay. Well, again, thank everybody for joining us tonight. Especially like to thank Bridget for not only the presentation, but all the research and really digging into the science behind it that went into this. It's really interesting. As a reminder, what we do with these, we've been recording it. We'll send you guys a link to the recording so you can refer back to it if you ever have questions. And I think, like I mentioned earlier, to help with the videos being a little jumpy, we will try to get those as a standalone recording and get you a link to that as well. That way it'll maybe be a little bit clearer to see. And then one other thing, you'll get a survey uh, in the email we send out, along with a link to the videos. There'll be a little short survey. If you can fill that out, it helps us improve these seminars for the future. So any feedback you give us is definitely welcome. So that's it this evening, unless somebody has anything else they want to share.
I just want to say thank you, Bridget. That's a very interesting method, especially because I have my first, all natural giant with natural ears. We tried 1,001 ways to tape his ears, but that way looks pretty like simple and straightforward.
Yeah, like I said, the old methods, they can work, but they weren't consistently working. And I
Yeah.
really like how this stabilizes the ear, and I'm like, wow, that's amazing. So I think we'll have a much higher success rate with the people who tried this.
Oh yeah, I definitely whenever Chris gets the videos from you from when you did the method, I'd love to see them because they were kind of skipping around on the screen, but that'll be very helpful because, in the future, when I eventually have, my first litter of giants, I do have people who have asked about like taping natural ears and stuff, and that'll be an interesting method to try out.
Great.
All right. Well, again, thank you for joining us, and I hope everybody has a great evening.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Thank you,
Thank
everybody.